Champions of Midgard. They say it's the Lords of Waterdeep killer. I can test that Lords of Waterdeep was already dead. Oh, I'm poking the troll. Roll the intro. Welcome back to The Point. My name's Michael Walker. Today we're looking at Champions of Midgard. It's a 2 to 4 player worker placement game by Grey Fox Games, where you plays in about 90 minutes, where you play a clan of Vikings that are helping the poor villagers because the king has died and monsters, undead, roaming the countryside. Are you going to be the champion that saves them? That's something that you're going to decide. I'm going to show you what a turn looks like, what I think of the game. Let's go. So we're going to do components and setup all at the same time, because literally you use everything from the box. The only thing we don't have on the board are these 4 buildings here are random every game, so we have some extra ones. So that's kind of neat. It'll be different every game you play. There are 4 military and 4 economic, so we're not using 2 of each of those. And some extra meeples per player. You'd only use those in a 2-player game. And there are 5 leaders that are all have different abilities. So there's one of those that we're not using either. So those are out of the game. Each player starts with 3 meeples, one of which goes in the middle that you can get throughout the game. 1 swordsman, and a food and a wood, 1 favor, 1 gold, 2 tokens, one of which we're just assuming that we put on our card so you know who's what color, and 1 for the score track. Maybe you can use this if you've passed 100 points or something. Then the board is simply placing all the buildings. You populate the buildings with the different kinds of warriors. Like we've already said, there's the swordsman, the spearman, and the axeman, which is black. Spearman's red. The smokehouse where you get food. Extra dice, wounds for when you wound monsters, troll deck, undead Draugr deck, monsters that you fight overseas. This is the journey cards. So when you go overseas, something bad, always bad, happens to you. Sometimes nothing. Then there's the merchant ships, which are kind of handy because there's 8 turns in the game, and there's exactly 8 cards. So then you can always check over here to see what turn you're on, to make sure you've moved the turn marker, because I know we're always so great about moving the turn marker. There's the Sage's Hut, where you're going to get victory point conditions. Everyone is going to start the game with 1. You can come here and you get to look at the face down journey cards and get a new set of victory conditions, as well as the one you already have. You don't replace. And here at the Runesmith, you'll get rune cards, which will give you a special ability and will also give you victory points at the end of the game. Some of the other places here is Jarl's Longhouse, where you get a swordsman and you get the first player token. I'm not going to go over all the rules. I'm just going to give you the feel of the game, and we'll go from there. So let's start turn 1. So we're ready to start the first turn. We've decided that Billy's going to be the first player. There's a very nice first player token. Players in turn order in clockwise turn order are going to place 1 worker on 1 building. There's 1 building here that can have multiple workers. This is the hunting ground where you get food. One of the other places I didn't talk about earlier was the shipwright. There are 1 ship per player on the side, and there are 2 public ships. So the shipwright, you come here to build one of your ships and place workers here if you want to go overseas to fight the monsters. I'll cover all the combat later. So here you'll place a worker here, and you'll choose one of these columns on this side, depending on which monster you want to fight. There are rules later that will tell you how many warriors you're allowed to place on the boats and how much food you can place, because you need to feed them as they go on their journey. We'll cover that later. Then all the other places are simply getting either victory points or more warriors or food or wood. in order for you to get victory points fighting monsters. You can also come up here, which will kill the troll. This has a neat mechanic where if you don't kill the troll, everyone will get these blame tokens. And whoever does kill the troll can lay guilt on one of the other clans. Say, look what I did, these guys did nothing. And he can not only get rid of one of his blame tokens, but give a blame token to another player. Only one player can go here. Same with these two spaces to fight the undead. One person per each. So it's like we said, it was Billy's turn. He wants to fight the undead. He places his worker here. Then it goes to Sarah's turn. She's going to place a worker here because she wants to start to get warriors, and she'll take the black die. And she'll put it over here onto her card. As you can see, the card only has spot for 8 warriors. That's the maximum you're allowed to have. And then each player keeps taking turns. As soon as you place the worker, you take the action immediately. The only place that doesn't happen is when you're doing fights against the troll or the undead or across the seas. Once all players have placed their 3 workers, or 4 once you've come here, how this space works is that the first person to get their meeple has to pay 5 gold, then the next player 4, 3, 2, 1. So you want to do it fairly soon because it gets taken up, and like I said, only one person can go there per turn, and there's only 8 turns. So once all players have taken turns placing their workers, we go to the combat phase, and then I'll show you how that works. Okay. Now that everyone's done placing all their workers, we go to the assign warriors phase. Warriors are simply the dice that you have on your card. You're going to assign them to the different places where you have fights in turn order. So Billy's our first player. He only has a fight here against this Druger, so he places 2 warriors here. Next is Sarah. She has the hunting grounds up here where you get food. So she'll place how many workers she wants here. When you place workers, you just simply put anywhere from 0 to as many as you have. Even if you've placed a worker there and you've just decided that you don't want to do that fight, that's fine. You place 0 workers there, you've wasted that worker, which is fine. Green now has gone overseas. So they have to not only assign warriors, but assign food as well. Along this thin track in here tells you how much food you have to feed your warriors. So these first two columns are 1 food per warrior, and these last 2 columns are 1 food will feed 2 warriors. So Chuck only has 3 warriors. This boat has a capacity of 5, which says here, and then there's this boat here that he could have taken, this public longship, which costs a gold, but it has a capacity of 10. Capacity is number of warriors plus the food you bring. So he's going to bring his 3 warriors and 2 food. Next is me. I have only 1 fight over here against this Druger. I assign all of my warriors. So now that the assign warrior phase is done, we go into combat. Usually we just start here. So Sarah's going to roll her hunting grounds. All she has to do is add up how many weapon icons she has, and that's how much food she collects to a maximum of 6, which is listed on the board. So she rolled 5 icons. She'll collect 5 food from the bank and place it on her sheet. Then we're going to do Billy's combat. So we're going to look at a card, the Druger card. You'll see where it has 2 combat and 1 shield. And it also has a special ability down here at the bottom, which in this case means no spearmen. So Billy is fine because he only brought swordsmen. He'll roll these dice, and he got no hits because Billy is just that kind of player. So he causes no hits to the Druger. No, the Druger is going to hit back. He hits for 2. So that means both of Billy's warriors are dead. They go back to the bank, and that combat is over. If Billy had scored at least 1 hit, then the Druger would be dead. And he would take that card. He would still lose both of his warriors, but he would take that card and get the benefit that's listed on the bottom, which in this case is 5 victory points and 2 gold. Then he also places this in to his play area, because at the end of the game, which I'll show later, you'll get more victory points depending on the different colors of monsters that you kill. The colors are listed in a gem that's just below the portrait on the card. So this goes into Billy's play area, and then we simply go through all the combat. I'll just do mine very quickly just so you can see how it works. My Druger is 1 combat and 1 defense. I roll my dice. I also pull a Billy and get no hits. This Druger only does 1 hit to me though. So I decide on which warrior is going to die, and we can fight again immediately. So I roll the dice again. This time I get 2 spear icons, which is 2 hits, which is enough to kill the undead, but it still does its 1 hit to me, so I kill another warrior, and then this warrior goes back to my play area. Now, the only difference down here is when you go overseas, it's a little different. So the first thing you do when you go overseas is you're going to flip over the journey card to see what happens. And it can be all sorts of stuff, like this is a storm, you could get a kraken, you could get all sorts of stuff. So in this case, Chuck got storm, which reads lose 1 food or 1 warrior. So then he has to decide. If he loses a food, then he only has 1 food left to feed his 3 warriors, and another warrior is going to die. So in this case, he might as well lose a warrior anyway. And then he goes to the feed phase, which means he uses up all of his food, which is enough to feed his warriors. That goes back to the bank. And now he has to fight the giant wolf. The giant wolf has 2 combat and 1 defense. So Chuck nearly needs to roll 1 hit, which he does not. So the wolf does its 2 combat, but Chuck rolled a shield. So he blocks one of the hits, so he only has to lose 1 die. He gets to do another round, he still has a chance. He rolls it and gets nothing, and then the wolf kills his final guy with his 2 attack. If Chuck had rolled 1 hit there, it would have killed the wolf, and he would have got the benefit from the bottom, which in this case is 8 victory points and a favor. So what Chuck's going to do is, because you start with 1 favor, he's going to use that favor, which you can use to re-roll. So he's going to re-roll that last combat die. And he gets a shield, which still doesn't help him. So that stays there. And Chuck, guys, is perished. Poor warrior. Went all that way for nothing. So what usually happens, and it's a funny story usually, is that all the warriors die, but the person still kills the beast somehow, and the captain comes back with grand tales of how all the warriors ran from the beast, and the captain had to kill the monster on his own, because there's no one to refute his story, because the warriors got enough hits to kill the beast, but the beast still had enough hits to kill all the warriors. So they would get that benefit. If Chuck had killed it, it would go back to his play area, because like I said before, these monsters also have a colored gem on the bottom that are going to go to final scoring, which I will explain later. So now that all the battles are done, we're going to go to the cleanup. So the cleanup phase is just repopulating the board. You remove any Druger that weren't killed, or the troll. If no one killed the troll, they get blame tokens. You put the new Druger out, the new monsters out. You flip over a new merchant card. You put the warriors back on, and food in the smokehouse, and you're ready to go for the next turn. After 8 turns, you go to final scoring. So here's my setup for final scoring. The first thing you do is the destiny cards. This one is have like the most food at the end, or have the most money. If you achieve any of these goals, you're going to get the bigger number. If you're tied, you're going to get the smaller number. And then, like I explained before, it's the colors on the bottom of the card. So the Druger undead plus the monsters, you can combine them. They're not separate. So for every set of 3, you get 5 victory points. So I have one set of 3, yellow, blue, and red. So that's 5 extra victory points. Then you're going to do the rune cards here. You just get victory points equal to the symbols at the bottom. So that's 5 points. Then you do the ships. If you bought a ship, every ship has points on it. 6 points for the ship. And the favor of the gods. They are 2 points each. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 points for that. Then money, for every 3 coins, you get 1 point. And then blame tokens. So depending on how many blame tokens, you're going to get minus victory points. So say in this case, I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 blame tokens. That would be excessive. But if you have 6 or more blame tokens, that's minus 21 points. But something more realistic would be 3 blame tokens. 3 blame tokens is minus 6 victory points. That's final scoring. Whoever has the most victory points is the winner. What do I think? All right, so that's Champions of Midgard. So what do I think? First of all, the fiddly bits. There's pretty well only one thing. This game's very tight. Is the rule book. But they've already put out a 3rd edition of it. So just go to Board Game Geek in the file section. So if you plan on playing this game or purchasing it, I highly recommend that you download those new rules. It clears up a lot of issues with the different buildings and other little problems it had inside the rulebook. Now, for the actual game itself, why is it so awesome? Well, you get to play Viking warriors, and you go out and you save villagers from trolls and dragons and giant wolves and undead. And it's just an all-around great game, and you can pack it into about an hour. You get 4 players that know how to play. You can knock this right out. It's great. The art is fantastic. I read some other reviews on the forums. They said they didn't like the dice mechanism because it was too random. In the groups that I played with it, they said it was the exact opposite. That's the part they loved. Rolling the dice, the combat, getting your supplies ready to go out, cross over seas, fight the big monsters. All around great game. So in this group of games, I'm going to class them as worker placement. These four over here are worker placement adventure, and these are just straight up worker placement. So in this class of games, I give it a strong 9 out of 10. Now these games here, we have Kalis, which is a classic straight up worker placement game that you try to build the castle for the king, and you're just fighting your opponents to try to get to those key locations before they do. And then there's Keyflower. If you haven't played Keyflower or heard of Keyflower, then you're watching the wrong video, because quite frankly, this is pretty well the #1 worker placement game that's out there. It's much heavier than the rest of these games, takes longer to play, but it is well worth it. It is a fantastic game. Then we have over here Lords of Waterdeep. I know I joked about Lords of Waterdeep earlier, but it's a really great adventure worker placement where your workers are actually different, right? You have to go out and you get your warrior workers, like the dice in Champions of Midgard, but there's sorcerers and all the meeples are different. You flip over a mission, it'll tell you which meeples you need and you send them out. It's really neat. Dungeon Lords, you get to build, it's also a tile and a worker placement. You get to build a little dungeon, and then all the adventurers come down and try to raid your dungeon, and you set traps off on them and send monsters at them. It's fantastic. The rule book for Dungeon Lords is pretty well the best rule book I've ever read. Caverna, if you like Agricola, it's worker placement. You create your little tableau with mines and fields and animals, drive to victory points. It's fantastic, very long and heavy, but it's really a great game. And then we have this, Robinson Crusoe. It's different than all the rest because it's a co-op worker placement game. So you can play with your friends, you place your workers on the different terrain tiles, you try to get supplies so you don't starve, you got to fight cougars and bears, you take supplies from the island and try to build like makeshift tools and weapons, and it's really great, and you die a lot, like a lot. So that's Champions of Midgard. Thank you very much for watching. To the point, my name's Michael Walker. I'll see you next week.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at coolstuffinc.com.